Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How can I help you?
Can you tell me if Alexa is available?
May I ask who's calling?
Nicholas Woodall.
Nicholas Woodall. Could you please hold for me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. This is Melanie.
Hi, ma'am. I had received a call from Alexa in your office.
Yes, she actually is on another line, and I had also reached out to you. We were just trying to follow up with you regarding the email that you had sent.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what can we help you with?
Well, I have not received a reply.
Okay, give me...
I received a generic reply on the 26th. They didn't answer any of the questions that are being asked.
Okay. What specifically are you wanting addressed? Maybe I can help you.
Well, Texans want to know, some Texans want to know, what can be done to show this office reason to create some draft legislation, see about moving these solutions forward for, the issues that they address. If you can pull up my information, I can give you the specific issues, but, it may be a little bit more complex than that.
Right. Give me your last name.
Woodall, Woodall.
Okay. Let me pull up your...
How are you doing today, ma'am?
Good. Good.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Give me just... Okay, so I have your email. It's fairly lengthy, so...
yeah, well, it should be fair and just 99 cents at gmail.com. But yes, the letter is fairly lengthy.
Right, okay. So, I haven't read it yet. I'm happy to read it. I don't know that we're going to be able to specifically answer each of your questions. I'm happy to visit with you, but as far as what can Texans do, I don't know that that's something that we're going to be able to answer.
Right. The question is, what can Texans do to show this office reason to create legislation on these issues? So, I don't know if you're from Texas. Are you from Texas?
I am, yes.
Okay, well, in 2017, Texas passed SB 30, a law that requires certain curriculums for schools, driving and driver's licenses and other information be created.
So that's going to be a state law that you're referencing.
Yes.
So your state did that.
Ma'am, you're going to need to follow with me on this. Bear with me on that rough voice. I apologize for the hoarseness.
That's okay.
This law that Texas passed creates education for rights and responsibilities when interactions with law enforcement occur. Interactions with law enforcement occur. So what's being asked is the ideological reason behind that, and may have been passed by Democrats, is a sound one, and I don't think that they really understood the concept behind it. But it's a human right that all people should be introduced into the laws that govern them before those laws are imposed upon them. Now, I'm not saying we've been doing it wrong. I'm saying we can do it better. Texans think that we can do it better. And so what's being asked is, what does Dr. Burgess need to see to show him that it is a human's right, but more importantly, an American civil right, to be introduced to the laws and educated in some measure before those laws are enforced upon them. And I realize that you can't, show this information to a 7-year-old, but I do think that introducing it at a high school age, the info's in the letter, ma'am. And so, can you do this? Make a note. If there's any confusion while filling out this letter, you know what? None of the people who are specifically in the group with me or who I've been talking with this about are college educated. So this may not translate over to someone who's college educated the same way that we hear it, see it, and understand it. But I promise you we're the majority on this one.
Okay, so you're wanting more education on laws before they go into effect?
No. What we're asking for is in the letter, all states and federal jurisdictions be required to inform of where to find this information and in some measure educate into the rights and responsibilities a person or citizen has when interactions with law enforcement or other people occur. That would mean your responsibility to stop when an officer says stop. Someone dressed like a law enforcer says stop. You have the responsibility to comply. If you don't comply, that's where the measures of punishment comes in. Telling people, well, then you could be going to prison for 1 to 3 years, depending on your state. You could be subject to fines. Officers could be entitled to use deadly force at this point or that point. And so I think it's thought that we can minimize nationwide the amount of payouts that are given when officers use excessive force in situations of resisting arrest. And that is most of the situations that you've seen, right? In the past 2-3 years, since 2014, it's always an issue of resisting arrest. Starting with that young kid who got shot in Chicago or St. Louis. Back in 2014, he had a plastic gun and did not comply with the request of officers. Well, if he had been educated into those responsibilities, I don't think that would have ever been an issue. Not one that was nationwide. It wouldn't have been nationwide newsworthy. So it would have saved us, millions of dollars. So this is millions and millions of dollars that are lost every year to each state, ultimately to the federal government. And it's something that can be stopped or minimized, as well as the resulting, issues that come from the riots or protests that turn into riots, because people will have been informed. You see where this is going?
Yes, but I'm not seeing it at the federal level. I'm seeing that more
that every state is required. Okay, so let me ask you, ma'am. That's why it's being asked, what this office would need to see to say, can the federal government make a law that requires a certain measure of information be provided to its citizens, similar to, you have the right to free speech.
Right. Okay.
A person's free speech can't be can't be infringed upon in any state. A person's Second Amendment right, the right to have a weapon, can't be infringed upon in any state. The right to a jury trial, a fair and speedy jury trial, can't be infringed upon in any state. And so the concept is that a minimal amount of information is a civil right or a human being's right, a human's right to be informed of, if not also educated in some measure, of what a person's rights and responsibilities are in regards to the law. Specifically, the issues that continue to arise. Resisting arrest, giving a measure of, well, ma'am, let me ask you this. Are you aware of anything that would prevent the federal government from making a law that would require states to provide a certain amount of information to citizens?
No. I mean, no.
Are you aware of anything similar, such as license plate laws or driver's license laws or any other specific law that would fit the outline of what is entitled to the federal government to, well, it doesn't sound proper to say impose, but to require that states have these information and provide them to their citizens? So persons in Wisconsin or persons in Chicago, Illinois, in, wherever have you, know what their rights are as citizens, just like Texans are being educated into their rights and responsibilities as well, because it's not due to just teach responsibilities or rights, but to also teach both. And so what's being asked is the concept of increasing human rights. Listen, I don't think we should get into that. I think it's interesting for the future, but an American's right should be to be informed of where to find criminal law. OSHA in county courthouses and city courthouses and federal courthouses, maybe in public libraries, wherever the state deems, wherever the the government, you guys deem to be appropriate places to say, we have done all we can. Signs at border crossing that says, here's where you find criminal laws. And also in this letter, I don't know if you have it in front of you, it's being asked, what about creating translations of criminal law? I understand we're not an official English language country, but generally it's the only language that we use. And I think it's important for persons to ease tensions. I think this fits perfectly with the Republican Party's concept of, we want immigration, but we want it in the right way. Well, people come over here, they can't read perfect English when they're getting a work visa for picking food or working some general labor job. It's not happening, right? And we need those workers to some degree. I don't know if we need 20 million illegal workers. That's neither here nor there. The issue is, ma'am, is that official translations don't exist. Requiring that this information be provided to people as an American civil right, or just as a human right, an American civil right, is to say that we would require that states and federal jurisdictions have translations of these laws as well. I'm not talking about all governing law. The concept is simply sticking to laws of criminal nature, or starting with those, and you guys can decide where it goes from there. To say that a person can determine what will happen if they call ICE, or if they report crimes, and so on and so forth, what their expectations can be. They'll be more likely to use the criminal justice system and will have less crime as a result of it. The same idea with requiring that all states and federal jurisdictions educate into these rights and responsibilities in regards to the law, specifically interactions with law enforcement and measures of punishment. It will likely result in lower crime, less payouts, less riots, less confusion, and so on and so forth.
Well, let me ask you this, because the information that you're wanting out there, I feel like is already out there. I mean, it may be incumbent on the person to go in search of it, but it is already out there. So with what you're wanting, who is it that you're wanting to provide this, and how are they going to be providing it to every single person?
To what measure do you say the information is already out there? When I say rights and responsibility education for specifically interactions with law enforcement, and in total increased access to law, which would be rights and responsibilities in regards to the law, the information just is there, but it is not easily understood or accessible. So if I said to you, where is the law for Texas that says a person has to stop when a law enforcer says stop, or a person has to comply with certain officers' request for search and things like that.
Right.
You may be able to go and find that information in state statutes or titles, but it's not going to be easy. It's not easily presented. And furthermore, a person's right, like the right to refuse to answer questions and things like that, or the right to say, I want to drive down the street to a safer place. That information just isn't available. And that's why Texas created SB 30. But other states do not have that information. And again, there's so many hypotheticals.
Right.
And without the information in front of me, it is such a long list to each one of these topics that, so when you say the information is there, yes, but you have to understand, you're looking at it from the concept of a person who has been college educated. You may even have some kind of master's degree, or, you may be furtherly educated, doctorates or whatever have you. But the majority of Americans aren't college educated. 10% of Americans aren't high school graduates. Strangely, and I don't know if these numbers match up or how they match up, 10 to 13% are stuck in poverty. 10 to 13% are, have committed some type of crime, whether it be a misdemeanor or a felony. I don't know what the laws are or what the numbers are as far as saying what percentage of crimes are being committed by persons of lower education. But I can tell you this, that criminals who aren't educated, or persons who aren't educated, and this starts in youth, from my experience, everyone I hate to say it, but a good portion of the people that I've grown up with are either dead or in prison or have been to prison as a result of their inability to find other options or to see other options. And so they took criminal activity as an option. I don't know if the lower 10% is causing the majority of the crime. Say if the majority of our state, or nationwide crime is caused by persons of poverty, stealing. The majority of crimes are theft crimes or fraud crimes, things like that. Stupid people aren't committing fraud so much. Maybe nowadays, credit card or whatever have you. Don't know those details. But what I do know is that if you show someone measures of education, measures of punishment, their rights and responsibilities and interactions, people aren't going to be running away. They may be a little bit more ornery with cops. They may be a little bit less ornery. But ultimately, good police work is going to result in good police work. If evidence exists, if reason exists to perform stops and take in information, then honestly, I wouldn't see this may be something that, it may go to committee before it's determined whether or not it would be a good idea to create this program, or how to create the program specifically, or how to create the requirements of the states to create their programs, would be to say, will this affect policing negatively? But I think that that's something that needs to be researched. And that is, again, why it is to be said, what does this office require before it would be willing to say, I believe that this is an ideological reason, or I believe that this is a positive idea to move forward legislation, or to move forward with this legislation, because it will result in decreased payouts to tax. It'll result in tax savings. It will result in people being happier when they get arrested. They'll say, well, I knew exactly what I was doing. Young kids will say, well, I knew exactly what I was doing, and I just wanted to do it because of this, because it was a thrill, because I wanted something right now, because I wasn't thinking properly. But people won't get stuck in that mentality of, you know what, nobody told me I was going to be doing 10 years in prison for walking into a store with a water gun and pretending it was real.
But you have to admit, they knew doing that there were consequences. They didn't go into the store with a water gun and try to hold it up and think that nothing was going to happen. They knew that there were consequences. So,
but that's not really the issue. That's not really the issue. The issue is sometimes it's hatred for the system. Where that hatred comes from. It's, oh, the system failed me, or someone else failed me. And as a result, I have to wait in line outside in the cold to get into the homeless shelter. And you know what? There's some Hispanic dude standing right next to me. He's not even an American citizen. He's getting into the shelter, too, with his fake ID.
How do you know he's not an American citizen, though?
Oh, man, because usually, ma'am, I mean, look, let's not get into the here or there or this or that. I don't know how to do all that info, and I mean, that's an ICE issue to say that, when a shelter doesn't require identification issue that illegals get in, that's a neither here nor there. That's just, So let's say this, ma'am. The issue is not whether the person knows what they're doing is right or wrong. Most people know the difference between right or wrong. But what most poor people don't always remember or understand or know is that there are other options, that the measures of punishment for some will feed them for a day, but lock them up for 3, 4 years, 5 years, is something that can simply be, that there's another option. Say you can go to the shelter, you can go to the food bank, and it is meant as a deterrent. So these people do know what they are doing is wrong, most of them. But what they're confused about, or what is the issue, is always a lack of sight of options. And so the person says, you know what, I can go get $500 if I go and rob and that's going to cover my rent almost for the whole month. But what, in reality, if they were taught, or if it was seen, and this is something that, this is happening with young kids, I would say selling drugs is probably the biggest issue of short-sightedness. Drug charges put you in prison for years upon years upon years. They give you life sentences in some situations. Now, when a person does that, as opposed to work a job and live at the shelter, it's because of fear, it's because of several different reasons, ma'am. But that is the reason for educating or requiring states, federal jurisdictions have this information available, and in states and certain jurisdictions introduce and educate, such as Texas does in schools, this information to say that this is the measures of punishment. This would also require that SB 30 be added to say that, these are felonies 1 through 6, misdemeanors 1 through 3, so on and so forth, depending on the state. And these are the punishments that go along with it. if you're caught for a theft, you're going to do 1 to 3. Literally, it can be done in 3 to 5 minutes, and it doesn't even have to be introduced to them or educated to them at the school. It just has to be introduced. It says this is where you find your laws, governinglaws.gov, and then you click on the link for your state, click on the link for your cities. After that, you have all the information that's required, or that's necessary to provide persons the information that they need to make informed decisions, because it isn't about right and wrong. It's about being informed about measures of punishment. I would say that if someone was if you're placed into a situation of a moral dilemma where someone was going to kill your family, or the alternative is that you go and kill one person, and this one person has equal statute and value in regards to a single member of your family. So they work the same type of job, they're the same skill level, they have the same active level of involvement in the community. They are not a burden nor a debt. They are the same value. And so when you get into those kind of fuzzy areas, honestly, it's a moral issue. People are going to say, well, maybe it's more beneficial for me to steal something from the store, possibly shoot someone, go, do this or that, or sell drugs, get involved with a gang, as opposed to go and live at the shelter or get into a halfway house where, criminal activity is less prevalent than in shelters. And so it's kind of like saying to someone, if you build good credit, you'll have good credit. Well, if you don't get a felony, you won't end up being a felon. You won't be denied housing. You won't be denied jobs. You won't be denied opportunities. So to say these things to someone at a young age, or to offer this information to someone at a young age, and to show them that not only will the punishment be more of a burden than it's worth, but that you'll say to someone, listen, the punishment is more of a burden than what it's worth. That's the simplest way I can put it. And so that's the concept behind this. And
I just don't know that that's going to be that's going to be federal legislation. That's more like what the state did with your SB 30, or local jurisdictions, or the school district, or, college classes, or it's going to be left for what you're looking for. That's more of a state, local jurisdiction. That's not really something I think that the federal government would provide legislation for.
Well, let me ask you this, ma'am. The concept behind it further, and I guess I stray away from human rights because it kind of involves, it would say, other countries or that matter, other people's, they don't really matter in this situation. And they have their own lives, they're doing their own things. This is about America. To say that, I would say, and if you think about it, if someone said to you, we're going to play a game, these are the rules, and you would say, well, what is the game? I've never played this game before. You would say, what are the rules? Explain them to me. If they started having rules and making rules as you went along, or explaining them as you went along, you learn them as you went along. You learn the rule from someone, but you learn that it only applied in a certain way. So you could have taken advantage of a certain situation. Well, that would be an unfair situation. That would be, it would be unfair. So to say the best way to govern fairly is to inform and educate in some measure before you enforce. And so that's why I say it is an American's right, or it should be an American civil right, or civil liberty, to say that states have the responsibility, federal jurisdictions have the responsibility, when applicable, to create the materials to inform and educate into rights and responsibilities in regards to the law, specifically in the situations of interactions with law enforcement, measures of punishment, and so on and so forth, as any committee sees fit. There could be other situations.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm happy to visit with his legislative aide that would work with this. I know there's nothing currently pending before Congress, so there isn't anything to share with you now, but I will be happy to bring this to her attention and see if, but because there's nothing currently pending, I don't know that there's much of a response for you. The office isn't going to be able to tell you what needs to be done before this is introduced. That's not something that we're going to know. But I'm certainly happy to bring it up with her.
Yes, and so can I ask, and I try to keep the information strictly to myself, keep it private, just say that I've been informed. Can you tell me who this person is, what I should be expecting as far as, because of the community, and I know that the Republican Party, I don't know really honestly how politics works. As a felon, I can't be a registered Republican. I can't be a member of the party. I can't vote. Therefore, I can't be a member of the party. But so the question is, what, because of the confusion that we've had, and because you say, well, this is more of an issue of, does it look like big government to say that states are required to provide certain information? I would say, does it look like big government to, require taxes at the level their taxes are required? Or is it big government to require health care, and again, that doesn't line up with this, but I'm saying this is entirely, those are situations of regulations and requirements being imposed upon people, not regulations being and rules being imposed upon the state. So this is an issue of the federal government saying you have to give your citizens at least where to go and get this information. You have to create this information to a certain standard. And so I would say I wouldn't want there to be a confusion with, I don't like big government. Honestly, I don't understand where those strange areas of big government come into in other situations and how they relate to this. But I would say that this is different because this isn't any burden on the citizen. A citizen has the information, and the information has been created for the citizen, so it's available to them by the state. So this is the responsibility of the state. This is the responsibility of the federal government. And so can you tell me who is this legislator, who is this legislative person, and what specifically might need to be provided to them based off of our conversation to say, well, this is how we advance to determine if this is something that the congressman wants to get involved in, or if the congressman needs to see further information, further research, and so on and so forth before he can make a determination.
So it is Alexa. She's the one that called you earlier, and I'll certainly let her know what we discussed, but I don't know what she's going to be able to provide you in a way of a written response, just because there's mean, there's nothing pending like that. There's nothing being introduced like that.
No, that's
so,
what is, that is, and I don't know how often this happens. This is to say that we are asking that the congressman,
right, I do understand that, yes,
create the legislation, or create legislation to create some kind of subcommittee or review board who determines the best way to implement, or the best way to do this or to not do it, and the reasons why it cannot be done.
Okay. Well, I mean, that she certainly can probably let you know about that. I don't know necessarily that it works like that. I don't know that he can just create a subcommittee for that, but
I do. Yes, ma'am.
But I certainly will. I will share this with her, and I will have her get back with you. But this would be something that would have to be introduced, and I do understand what you're saying, that you want him to do that. I don't know that he is in a position to do that, but I certainly will share it with him and her. So you can I'll have her say that again.
Briefly, if you say that the congressman is not in the position, I know you don't mean, well, I don't actually know what you mean. Do you mean to say that he may not have the powers, or do you mean to say that it would require co-sponsors?
Right, there's a process that it would have to go through before it could be, voted on, and there's nothing even in the works for something like this. So
yes, so it would require, what would you call it?
I'm sorry, say that again.
It would require some research to be done, and that might require legislation just to get the research done, correct?
I don't know about that. Alexa just got off the phone. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Alexa.
Hello, ma'am. Nicholas Woodall.
Hi. Yes, I believe I did call you a couple times. You were calling about an immigration issue, correct?
Well, there's a couple issues, ma'am. It's not so much immigration issue. It is tied to immigration. It is tied to several issues. The issues are, if you could pull up the letter.
So, yeah, Melanie did just, she kind of caught me up a little bit. So you had wanted Congressman Burgess to introduce a law that told the states that they were required to inform the public about laws?
Yes. Yes, to sum it up, that's a good portion of the issues that have been brought up, is that it would be to say an improvement or a furtherance of American civil rights or their liberties, or to say even a human being's rights as a human being to be informed of and in some measure educated into their rights and responsibilities in regards to the law. The concept of that is to say that the best way to govern fairly is to introduce the information before you enforce those rules. And so
right, and I think most states and local governments and the federal government as well, they are required and they are given money when a bill or law is put in place and beginning to be enacted, to be able to post things on their website, have people do those educational things to be able to explain what this is. And we now have the press and social media and stuff that helps a lot with that as well. So I don't think it's not necessarily a right for people to be educated. It's really their responsibility to be educated on the laws.
No, ma'am. I think we have a misunderstanding here. So to say that it's someone's right to be educated should they seek the information, that the information should be there.
Right,
as far
absolutely.
as states and federal jurisdictions, can I ask you, are you from Texas?
I am.
Okay. So are you aware of SB 30 from the 85th regular session, Interactions with Law Enforcement Education?
I primarily work with federal government legislation, so I'm not too
familiar
with.
Real quick.
Okay.
What it is it was actually created by a Democrat. I don't know how it got that way, but what it is in 2017 a law was passed requiring that certain materials be created to educate persons into their rights and responsibilities when interactions with law enforcement occur. This is something that no other state has that I'm aware of. There may be a couple states I haven't talked to, like Alaska, but as far as California to Florida, New York, Illinois, these states don't have this program. What it is education, a short video, but it doesn't have to be a video. It could be as simple as a sheet of paper that says things like rights and responsibilities when interactions with law enforcement occur. You have the responsibility to stop if an officer asks you to stop. You can request a warrant if an officer says a warrant to show you this information. You don't have to answer certain questions. You have to be read Miranda rights. Officers can use force in situations of this, and that minimal force can escalate to deadly force if you react and are aggressive and an officer feels threatened, so on and so forth. If you have your hands...
Yeah, I just looked up the bill, and this is actually, like I know that this wasn't enforced when I was in high school, but we actually did have something like this where we had a police officer come in and there was an assembly and he kind of explained, maybe not as in-depth as this law, which is probably why it was signed into law, but yeah, definitely something where I was instructed, and this was probably 2014, 2015, somewhere around there, before this law was passed, that they were already doing that and informing us of our rights and things like that. And really, I think that's why we have like a civics class as well. Like, we're supposed to be learning about these things.
Yes, but however, ma'am, you're going to have to understand that if a person's absent that day, the information doesn't exist.
Well, then this law would not be helpful in that either if a person was sick on that day. So.
Well, that's right because of the way it was written, but there's always improvements that can be made to laws. just like the concept of governing more fairly, or the best way to govern. You know, if we were playing a game, and I said, we're going to play a game, I had to do, you know, a device for playing the game. And I said, now let's start. I said, oh, that's a point for me. And he said, well, how did that work? I said, well, I'm going to explain the rules as we go along. You're not going to be as happy with the game as if someone educated you into how to play the game, your rights and responsibilities. This is the same concept with this law. And that's to say that SB 30 can be improved as well. But it is the concept of saying that to govern fairly, to grant people their rights, that states are required to provide this information to citizens. This isn't a requirement of citizens to learn the information. It is simply a requirement of states to have the information available. In fact, I'd be curious to know if there's a law that requires states to have criminal law or to have law printed in books. It may just be something that's done because if you didn't do it, people wouldn't have the information. That could be something that may need to be reviewed as well, to say that states are required to have this information. Now, I don't want to go out here or there, but let's just keep it focused on the concept is...
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying, and that does sound, yeah, in an ideal world, everyone would be very engaged in the government and know all of their laws, and we would be able to inform everyone.
We're not trying to do that, ma'am. What we're focusing on here is the people who commit crimes or who get... I have a long history. Most of the people I'm familiar with have criminal records. I lived in lower class poverty for most of my life, if not all of it, aside from a few years, you know. And 10% of the population is poor. Approximately 10% of the population has committed a crime, such as a misdemeanor or a felony, you know, whether it be driving drunk or stealing credit card information or stealing catalytic converters or whatever it be, selling drugs, whatever. A lot of criminals, or at least the prison population, are usually offenders from youth. They get into this starting when they're young. And so to say that while SB 30 introduces education for interactions with officers, rights and responsibilities.
Right, and this is a great idea. I totally agree with this bill. I just don't see how we could do that nationwide. We're really not supposed to be telling schools what they can and can't teach. That is the state responsibility, which is why this is a state bill and not a federal bill. I do think this is a good idea, and I will definitely look into ways that we could expand on that and do it federally.
I don't mean to be rude, but you're looking at this from the wrong perspective. This doesn't have to be taught in schools.
Then how would it be disseminated? Like, how would you inform people of this if not? I mean, everyone has to go to school, so that I believe that this is a great solution for that. While you're in school, you have to be there. This is a great solution for that. What is your solution for nationwide?
Right. So I would say that I wouldn't want this to be viewed as big government or a burden to say. And I've talked with a couple different states superintendents, and a lot of the times what I've heard is they say, you know, when they're hesitant about this, they say, well, you know what, I don't want something else to have to deal with, because they're already dealing with so much. So the situation, and this is, I guess, where this is where CRT may taint this issue or may cause confusion, to say that this isn't requiring that an ideology be taught, or that a specific way of thinking is taught. This is not that. It's absolutely not that. This is to simply say that states are required to create these materials, and in some measure, whatever measure this government, the federal government, determines, we can say, what, maybe you could create posters, but the posters will be required to be placed in schools or libraries, obviously,
like public places where lots of people would be, yeah.
Right, and so it would be, but I would say that the best way to create a deterrent to crime is to catch it early. And I know crime. I know crime better than a law enforcer. It's just when it comes down to it, it starts at youth. And if you taught someone measures of punishment, if you introduce to them, and this can be done in less than 5 minutes, all this information that we're talking about, to simply say, these are felonies 1 through 5, 1 through 6, misdemeanors 1 through 3, and so on and so forth. And these are the crimes that go along with it. These are the most common crimes: theft, violence, drunk driving, intoxication, drug charges. And these are the resulting crimes: 3 to 5 years, 10 years, 25 to life if you're caught with several prescription pills. And so the result is, this isn't some type of, ideology to say someone is right or someone is wrong. This is to say that as we improve and advance in technology and availability, that this information is available. These educational materials should be required by the states so that you can deter people from choosing crime when they don't see an option. And that is always the option. 99% of the 10% of criminals are going to tell you they committed the crime because they didn't see a better path. They needed to feed their family. They had to pay bills, and this was an easier way to do it. They had a backache, and it was easier to go and steal some credit cards and this and that. And so it was always easier to do this as opposed to, maybe it was the pride or whatever, go and stay at the shelter, go and get into a halfway house, find the other options, because they couldn't see the other options. So to say that if we require that states, let's say jurisdictions, wherever appropriate, are required to create these materials and have them available, I would say that while posting signs is an option, just like creating translations of criminal laws, so that non-English persons can report laws better, be better informed to say, even if they commit less crimes because they're smarter criminals, then at least they're committing less crimes. But to say that, how it's introduced would be introduced in the schools, that would be only because persons should be entitled to this information. Now, you might have a couple of school superintendents and teachers who may be a little flustered that they have to show a 5-minute video. And as far as, whether they have to keep attendance on that day, no, they don't have to keep attendance on that day. Whether they need to, even let the kids, do whatever they want to do. But you've offered it to them. And so the idea is that the majority, again, will see, that there's another option if you get into this situation, that crime does not pay. It is a burden upon a burden. It will be a forever burden. Once you get that felony, you can't get jobs, you can't get housing, which results in other burdens, which will keep you poor, which will keep you in those situations. And so to say that, the federal government is now requiring or would be requiring that this information be placed in schools, it could be as simple as a 5-minute video. And when I get down to it, scripting it out and so on and so forth, it could be that quick. It could be shorter. It would be best determined by educated professionals, and maybe, I might have a couple things to say. You might want to ask a couple criminals who've been reformed and are doing things in the communities. That would be for a committee to go forth with.
Right. I understand what you're saying, and that does sound like a good idea. But that, so yeah, I will take a look and see what we're able to do federally. But I do recommend you also give your idea to your state representative and state senator.
I'm actually talking with. Trying to get a meeting with Whitmire of SB, who was the co-author on SB 30. And again, like I said, it's already been implemented. But there can be improvements made to it from where it is so far, such as creating translations of criminal law, which don't exist. There's other issues, and if translations of criminal law are created, then it would be to say that you would also start asking people, where do you find your criminal laws in regards to naturalization tests? Because it's something that doesn't exist. There's a bit more to the letter. There's queries that I realize that at this point in time with coronavirus, that these situations may not be addressable right now. But again, as far as the steps go for reviewing or determining what this office needs to move forward, do we need to have some petitions signed? Do we need to start practicing reaching out to people on a nationwide scale so that maybe other states would adopt this, so that the support would be there if the idea was introduced? That's kind of the question of what this situation is. So when we get to it, can you tell me what your next steps will be and what my forward thinking, forward action should be, as far as to say you're going to have to review federal law to determine if states can be required to provide this information, similar to having a driver's license to drive on federal roads. But, I know there's a gray area, just like with those criminal law books. There may not even be a law requiring that criminal law books are written and provided in libraries, but every state has a criminal law book at their library, if not at the courthouse's library. And so it just may be a different way of thinking. With that said, can you tell me what your next steps will be, so that I have some type of ideas can be made, maybe thinking about what your next needs may be?
Yeah, sure. So my next steps will be to look for any previous legislation that looks like this, and really just making sure that we're able to do this legally on a federal level, and seeing what other states have bills like this. Kind of just doing some research and basically looking into the history of this issue, or seeing if something federally is already enacted like that in the past, if we can maybe make that better instead, because that might be easier to do. So really just kind of trying to figure out if it's even possible for us to do this at a federal level, or if it would have to be done by different states, because education really is controlled by state and local governments. The federal role in education is mostly done through funding and things like that. So we don't have jurisdiction over the smaller, more minute things. So just really seeing if that's something that we would be able to do.
Right.
As for you, I mean, you're more than welcome to have people contact our office and share their opinion as well. Everyone is always welcome to do so. But
right.
I mean, you
to be entirely honest, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
The majority of, I mean, you know, the majority of the people who are active in this are criminals who say that, you know what, this is how we could progress to minimizing, you know, criminal behavior. So, you know,
that's great.
they're not.
Yeah.
They can call the office and say how they feel, but but again, I don't want to take this office's time. That's why I'm calling. That's why, you know, to say that nobody wants this to look like all these other weirdos. And I don't want to call everyone a weirdo, but I'm saying there's some strange characters out there, you know, following people into bathrooms and, you know, standing outside protesting with signs. We don't want to be a bother. We know that this is an issue that is a minority issue. While crime affects everybody in the community, whether it be, you know, the cost of crime or whether it be the actual victims of crime, it still is a smaller issue. And so I do appreciate the time that you've taken to talk with me and clarify the questions and the time that it will take to research this. So as far as calling in, I can do something like get everyone to say a short sentence if there is a question of you want to see support. However, if this is a question of, you know, you're perfectly fine with the information that we've discussed and the reasons behind it and the ideological purpose or the ideological reason and the purpose of reducing crime is the reason for doing the research, then we can do that. But if you need more people to call, I can get them to call you in and say like a one-sentence phrase, a short 5-second.
Any constituent is more than welcome to call in anytime. You're more than welcome to tell people to do that. That's fine. That's what we're here for. We have staff specifically to answer the phones and take everyone's messages and give them to Congressman Burgess. But it's not a question of support. It's really a question of if the federal government can do this, and that's what I need to figure out. If you would like to help me with that, that would be great. And you know how to write into our website, and I can those will get to me, and I will be able to see that when it pops up, or I can give you my email. If we can, so basically that's my next steps. You're more than welcome to tell people to call in, but it's not about getting a ton of support for this. It's about Congress being able to do this.
Okay, then let's do this. Can you give me a determination of, or can you give me some kind of idea as to how your scheduling works, or how do you have like you know, an inbox and it's number 37 in the inbox? Can you give me some type of?
I really don't keep any type of list like that where anything's more important. I mean, really, just this week is really busy with the congressman being in D.C. and voting. Just everything is coming up at the last minute, and we're doing a whole lot of things. So I really don't have a ton of capacity to be dedicating a lot of time to doing that this week. But maybe in a couple weeks when we are not in session, that would be a better time for me to dedicate.
Can you do me a favor, ma'am? You're kind of trailing off a bit. Could you speak up a hair?
Sure, absolutely. Is that better?
That's very, very good volume.
Great. Yeah, I don't have a ton of capacity to do much of this week, but we can revisit this next week or the week after that, and I am happy to call you, or you can. I can give you my email, and we can follow up that way once I have some more time.
If you provide me with an email, I'll send you over my contact information, and we can stay up to, we can stay in touch that way.
Great. Yes, that would be at mail.house.gov.
Okay, ma'am. All right. I will let you go then, and
yeah,
I will,
just email me, and if you have any more information on this, or yeah, just any more information on maybe how this is being implemented, the kind of educational materials that Texas is using currently, that would be really helpful, and then we can revisit this next week.
Okay. Real quick, you say that your first step is to verify that the federal level this can be done. So correct. Would it be fair, or would it be reasonable, would it be a help to this office for myself to call out to other states and verify that this information doesn't exist in some way? Would you happen to have, say, search points? Should I say, well, look at this as SB 30 in Texas? Again, I'm not really educated or eloquent to say that if I'm not practicing using the speech or using the language or with the situation, I can't really tell you what to do about it. What would you say as far as reaching out to other states and determining if they have anything similar, to double check again?
Sure. And you're talking about specific states, not congressional offices in D.C.?
No, I'm talking about specific states, say contacting, I guess, governors or the state legislators, the heads of the legislative bodies,
sure.
and asking, do you have anything similar to this educational program? And I would stray away from calling it an educational program. I would
I would just do what you've done with me is kind of explain SB 30 and ask if there's a bill like that in their state. I'm not sure how many governors you're going to get a hold of, but you're more than welcome to call around, and that would be helpful to see if other states have a law like this.
Right. I'll keep documenting records who I speak with, the names of the legislative offices and the determinations, and we'll see how far we can get. That might be a little. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll look for your email.
All right, do fairandjust99cents@gmail.com.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye.